But Nathan, thank you. It's awesome to have you here. I know that you said thank you for being flexible, but I'm like, no, thank you for coming in. I was like, I'm very appreciative of you being here, but also because I have a MMA story from the gym, and it was very, very early on, and it was a moment of niceness and sincerity, whether you knew it or not. Huh. So I was probably 6 or 7 months in. When I walked in, I didn't know anything. And then I was like, you know what? I'm working nights, and I'd stay overtime. And I was like, let's go to the morning MMA class. And you were in there. And I was, peeping you a little bit, looking over. I'm like, this guy's good. And he knows what's going on. And immediately it was like, all right, time to do some rounds. And I'm like, okay, I'm feeling good. I think I got a good base. And it was the first round. And I was like, hello. I was like, hey, Nathan, do you want to go? And you were like, sure. Like very calm. And I'm like, that's not a good sign. Usually they're like, yeah, dude, let's get over. You're like very calm. And then I remember, from at that period of time when you're like 6, 7 months in, you're like, oh, I'm going to try everything. I'm going to try and do this and trick this and do that. And I was like, he saw everything. So you saw everything. You had a lot more background, and with full opportunity could have just, tore me apart. And you didn't. Everything. I still remember, like, I'm going to throw a leg, but I'm going to fake it, and then I'm going to go up top. And it was like, whoop, lean back, block it. And I'm like, I'm like, this isn't working out the way I thought. And so for me, that was a really big moment of, everyone talks about treating your training partners correct and being there not only for yourself, but also for them. And without them, you wouldn't have that kind of growth. And so I appreciate you doing that, even though if you didn't even know that you were doing it.
Yeah, thank you. I don't usually like to go too hard in sparring. I like to use it as I usually like to go into sparring with a few things that I like to do or that I want to do, to focus on. And so I'm only focused on hitting those objectives and less so about competing.
Yeah.
I used to compete in the sparring room, but as I've gotten older, I can't hang with the young guys the same. Maybe like a round or two, but when we are throwing up 5 rounds, there's just no way.
Yeah. You say that, but then I was like, I've done my due diligence. I've done my research, and I was like, I still remember, I'm like, I know he's the jab. Like I've seen clips and things of you like on, Instagram and YouTube, and you're like, pop. And I'm like, oh no, watch that. Watch out for that. Immediately watch out for that. And so that was the thing that not interests me with you, because after that moment, I was like, who is Nathan? And I was like, okay, let's go where everyone goes. That's Facebook. And then I'm like, wow, he's done more than, he's done one. He's, I started scrolling, no offense. It sounds like I'm stalking you now. But I was like, oh, these are very good, like, inputs on subjects that quote unquote are tough outside of, in regular society. And I'm like, he's very intellectual and a very cool person. And so when I first got this thing up, I was like, I know that having him in here and being able to just kind of go was like, that's something that I really want to have happen. So again, I thank you so much for being here. It's going to be a great day.
Thank you. Yeah, going on the background stuff is just, I had this idea in my head that when I turned 20, I felt old. It's like crazy. I remember the night, when I watched it turn midnight, and I was like, wow, I'm officially 20. And I told myself, oh my goodness, I'm no longer young. Yeah. I told myself I'm no longer young in the sense that when I do things from 20 on, people are not going to be surprised anymore. Like when you're 18, 19,
right,
and you accomplish something, they're like, wow, that's the youngest person.
Oh, the wonderkin. Yeah.
But then once you hit 20, you're in that league where you're supposed to be doing great things.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, I have to compile all these things, all these stories to pass on to my kids. And, I think what's interesting is I have a son and a daughter, a daughter who's older, a son who's younger. And I think something kind of changed once I had a son, where I was like, wow, I really can't suck. I want him to have this, like, at least have some sort of legacy from which he can go like, oh, this is my background. I have nothing to do with it, or I'm not interested in, whatever my father did. But this is what my father did. And
Well, I think it's a good space even to, because like I was talking about my grandfather, like even as a young kid, that was enough to make me go like, that means he built something he wanted. Like that means I can do the same thing. And then it literally was like, I didn't realize it, but from that moment on, everything I had done, I'm like it just reassured something's possible, even though it's just maybe up here in my head. And so, and I think that's something beautiful, because it also happened to my kiddo.
Yeah.
And I'm like, he's coding things, building and crafting things for himself.
Amazing.
I never would have guessed. Like, I really thought that he would just, I used to play video games.
Yeah.
I never used to build them.
Was there any point where you cultivated that inadvertently?
This room. So whenever I'm in here, he's usually in here. So like Sundays, we go to church, and then we get to see his grandparents, and then most of it, I'm like, do you want to be with them tonight and they'll take you to school? Or do you want to come back home or go to the studio? And he's like, I miss grandma and grandpa, so I think I'll go with them today. And I was like, they're taking you to McDonald's. He goes, always after church. And so it's just like, I think doing that is giving him the freedom to make those decisions. But, there's times where I'm at that desk and he's at this desk and he's doing his thing. And I think it just hit when I was enjoying it and he's watching me and being quiet and like, oh, look at Dad, have fun. And then I'm like, but after fun, the person leaves, we say bye, and then he has to do something for 3 hours. And he goes, what's going on? And I'm like, well, I mean, I got to put this all together now because we're in studio, but then when we go home, we can play and do all this stuff. And so it's like that balance of fun and hard work. And I think that transitioned to him finding he had fun with this video game, searching for it, and then he found that he could make them. And then it was like inadvertently transitioning to him going, oh my gosh, I'm going to make video games when I get older. Wow. And I'm like, who would have guessed? Like, there's certain things that you don't know. And I think that's the beautiful part about being a parent, being a dad. Yeah. Like, you don't know who these little guys are going to become. Yeah. But like you said before, they get their own people. They're not replicants of you to like, yeah, I played football, so you got to play football, It's just like, I can't stand that.
No,
I really can't.
Definitely. I'm excited to see who my kids will become. I try really hard to open up spaces where they can explore what they want to be. But I also want to share my stuff so that in case they find it interesting, they kind of have a head start. Yeah. What's wild is that my daughter, so I have a daughter who is really, really shy, with a really big heart, and very, very athletically gifted. I mean, what's wild is that I remember when she was born, and I'm not sure if this is how other babies are like. I mean, my son wasn't this way, but she just was ripped. She was, she just has like muscles on muscles, and she's always been like that, like, 6-pack and everything. And I just remembered when she turned 3 or 2.5, 3, she would run around our apartment back then. And I was like, wow, she's so fast. And she would jump, and I'm like, you have hops. You are athletically gifted. But given her personality, we'll probably keep that fairly contained. But the other day, what was interesting is my son got this little punching bag thing for Christmas, and my daughter was hitting it in his room with no one watching or no one hearing or anything, or she didn't think that there was an audience. Right. And I just started hearing like like fast hands, boom, 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 boom. And I'm like, oh my God.
Look what's happening.
I was like, I think you're the chosen one. Like a Kung Fu Panda,
it's
like
given to me. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And it was just marvelous to watch that. I mean, most likely she's going to get into something creative or artsy, or I could see my daughter becoming an architect one day. Yeah. Whatever she wants to be, right? But man, that is a layer of skill that she was just blessed with.
Well, I think that's really good, because I think you have a really good handle on, not saying that, but I'm going to say it. Many people don't. Like, it's usually the replicant theory, and like, I made this thing is going to then do this. And I'm like, no. Like, you might have had a play in it, but like, they are their own thing. Yeah. So like, if you see that they're gifted, physically, like, my kiddo would do, I remember one time he was doing a handstand on a table, like tables here, and he's like balancing, He's just watching TV and like doing things at like this at 3, 4, and I'm like, he doesn't know I'm watching, and I go, what's going on? How long have you? It's been like a minute, you know, and he's just like, what? I'm like, okay, but like that didn't make me like push him into doing things like you need to do this because you're so gifted. Like they need to make that call.
Yes,
they got to choose that because then it's like it's the same. I've seen it with. A common example is like, the church, like the people who've been in church their whole lives because they're like, we have to go on Sunday, right? They didn't really get to make the call of like, I like to go to Sunday school.
Yeah. And
then they're like teenage years, high school, they're like, I can drive, I can get away with stuff. And they're like the rambunctious ones. Yeah. And then, I feel like that would transition the same way. Be like, I hate football. And it's like, but I bet if you chose it in the right circumstance, you'd probably love it. Yes. So it's like you have to let them kind of do that.
So that's very interesting that you bring that up because when you said I hate football, that unlocked this memory for me where when I was growing up, my dad got me into martial arts. Dad got me into kung fu. I think when I was in kindergarten.
Oh, merci.
But it wasn't anything practical. Like it was just forms.
Yeah.
And occasionally I would have to hit like a punching bag or like a punching pad, like the instructor would hold it, but it was primarily forms, and I hated going to kung fu.
You were like, this sucks.
And I just remembered having, I think when I was around 4th grade or so, 3rd, 4th grade, I would have these little standoffs with my dad where I'm like, I don't want to go. I hate this.
Yeah.
And he kept me in, or he kept me in, but also was like, it's your choice at the end of the day. So if you don't want to go, but then I don't know why I felt like I didn't really have that choice. Like he
probably was it authentic? Was it an actual choice, or was he? It's like someone goes, you could have this, but it would be the best thing for your life if you win anyways.
Yeah, it was more or less that one where he wanted me to stay in it and wanted me to see it through up to a certain point. And I think we kind of had like a parameter of like, okay, once I hit high school, I could quit. And once I got into high school, I did quit.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I just didn't want to do it anymore. I was just tired of the forms.
Well, it's also funny because that's like another perfect example because then instead of thinking about like how can I improve the forms I'm doing, you were like, how much longer till I get to high school till I can be done? Instead, maybe you made the choice, then liked it and did this. But, they put me in karate in like my kiddo's age, 3rd, 4th grade. I mentioned it earlier in one of these episodes, but it was like, around that time I was getting really picked on, like physically beat up. And, like in the office, and they were like, no, I didn't do anything. And I'm like, yeah, you did. I'm like, you did it. I'm like, I didn't do anything. And then I'm like, why am I in here? I'm a nice kid, Yeah. And my dad's like, were you getting bullied? I'm like, yeah. Physically, yes. He goes, you're going in karate. Like, it was just like, you need to learn to defend yourself. And then I ended up loving it. But then I don't know if he saw something or something happened. Like maybe someone got hurt and he never said anything in karate class. But we would do sparring. And of course, we're 3rd graders. But I still remember it had to have been a left hook. Because I remember hitting the side of the head guard of an older kid who was in the 5th grade, and he cried. And like it really hurt. Yeah. And I was small. And that was never a thing for me. And I remember the switch, and I was like, it's like this little demon wanted to pop out. I'm like, yeah, it felt good. I was like, and I was like, if they let me keep going or they didn't stop, and he goes chase down, turn around, and like very different. He let him recover, and then, he was just like, we're going to be done with that for you guys today. And I was like really upset.
Oh, wow.
Because I was like, no, I was literally taking this older kid as the older kids who were picking on me. And I'm like, that's a very bad negative reference point. So I don't know if my dad saw that or, saw that you could get hurt. Yeah. But for me, I loved it. And he pulled me out because I had just achieved like your 2nd or 3rd level, whatever. And I was like, I'm doing it. I'm getting the goals. And I've always kind of been that oriented. Like, ooh, I want this. I'm going to work my butt off, get it, and then do that. But yeah, looking back, I realized that probably wasn't a good thing to cultivate that anger and that,
Mm.
it just didn't feel right,
Yeah.
And I'm like, it should be something that, you choose. And they said over and over, this is for self-defense only. And I was like, a little bit of me was like, yeah, but I'm going to take it way farther if they choose it,
Yeah.
And I was like, that probably wouldn't have been a good thing to pick up on. But that is one of my earliest memories of a martial art really like changing the way that I could handle an outside force or situation.
Mm.
And I didn't know if that was part of your thing with your dad. What was his main thing of putting you in the martial arts in the first place?
So I would say that I think naturally I wouldn't say passive is the right word, but I'm very easygoing. And I think easygoing and also very agreeable, but also very prone to being picked on.
Yeah.
And I think in kindergarten I was just kind of picked on a little bit.
Yeah.
And
It's the shy one.
Yeah, throughout I would say throughout elementary school, throughout high school, I definitely had moments where, I had bullies just like most people who join martial arts.
Yeah.
And so once I quit Kung Fu, got into high school, then it was like, oh my gosh, I'm small compared to these big, seniors or whatever.
Yeah.
And, I got picked on by upperclassmen. And so it kind of reignited this like little martial arts flame, but it became my journey instead of
Right.
the journey that my dad put me in. But yeah, I just grew up, and it's very interesting because I'm not sure culturally if so I'm Chinese. I don't know if other Asian dads are like this, but as as someone who has a Chinese dad and growing up in the Bay Area in California, we had access to a lot of kung fu like movies, and especially when they first came out. And I would take kung fu in Chinatown in San Francisco, and
wow.
so being there, let's say like we go to a restaurant to eat, then we walk to kung fu. I would have to go by like a movie theater, and like there would be like a movie that comes out. It's like a Chinese movie, Chinese kung fu movie.
Yeah.
And it would be so fascinating for my dad and I. And so we would like watch that stuff. And I think over there, you walk by the stores in Chinatown, I saw a lot of Bruce Lee, memorabilia and things. And I was like, who is that guy? I've never heard my dad talk about him before. And once I discovered Bruce Lee, and I'm not sure why my dad didn't introduce me to Bruce Lee. I don't think Bruce Lee was at least at that time, wasn't the most popular person for Chinese people, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because Bruce Lee, I'm not sure if our audience like knows like the history, but essentially, traditionally, Kung Fu was taught to Chinese people only. And it was
very specific. Just
it was essentially thought of as a secret.
Wow.
I'm sure you've probably heard of that quote that goes on something like, "If you're weak, pretend you're strong," or no, sorry, "If you're strong, pretend you're weak."
Right.
And I think that's the overall meta of Kung Fu, is that it's a secret. It's this like secret that you kind of keep to yourself, that you only bring it out when you need to.
Yeah.
It's a self-defense thing. And, my dad brought that into, when he knew that I was getting bullied or people were picking fights with me, he would say like, don't fight, son. Like, absolutely do not fight. Do not use your Kung Fu. Don't fight. But if you have to, don't lose.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh shit. Like,
you were like,
I'm scared of this. Like,
pressure.
This is very scary. But Bruce Lee was different. Bruce Lee was born in San Francisco, but went right back to Hong Kong to live out in his adolescence, and came to America to pursue college and etc. And he taught, one thing that was very different about him was he taught Kung Fu to non-Chinese people.
Oh, that was it. They were like, this is the secret.
He said, hey, we're all human. I'm teaching them based on their willingness to learn, not their willingness to fight. So what's interesting about him was he would have students that like, oh yeah, teach me how to fight, teach me how to be a badass. And it was like, okay, let me put them on conditioning for like 2-3 days or something. And the people are like, this sucks.
Yeah.
And then like, that was his like way of weeding people out, because he wanted people to learn the art. And so I didn't get much exposure to Bruce Lee growing up until it became something that I discovered on my own, more or less.
Yeah.
but martial arts, kung fu, and fighting in general was something that I was always around. It was
Mm.
always in my headspace, even though my dad didn't participate in it, which is also very interesting.
That's crazy. And also, Bruce Lee, you had it right. That's the perfect way to weed those people out. Because I was at my first experience at an MMA gym was at Gladstone, and that's what we did. Like 3 kids who had like shorts and like, you know, a rock T-shirt on, like AC/DC or something. You know, just like long hair, like think they're rebels or whatever, maybe are in shape. And the first thing they asked the front desk was like, "Is this UFC? You do UFC?" And immediately I forget his name, but he just looks at us with a smile like before class, like, "We got him." Like he's at 3. And Zach Cummings, who will be on the show too, him and Chris Gregory, he was like, "Boys, we're changing the plan today." He was like, "We're changing," because most of us were in there consistently. You know, I've been going there maybe a month, and it was just all conditioning. And man, by the end, these boys were just sweating and like giving up. I mean, quick. And then I was like, well, at least I'm not them. You know, it was like a good thing. I'm like, oh, I'm learning and being better. I'm not a quitter, you know?
Yeah.
And that's a really good way to see who's serious about it. And also figure out what you're in there for. Like, eventually I had to realize that, you know, was I doing it for... I realized quickly that I was doing MMA mostly for vanity. I was like, this can lead to being in front of people, and then those people look at me like I'm something that they think I'm not. I was like, they you know, Chase, he's always been small, very skinny, right? And then I would go to like Tidal or like these different gyms, and like, you have some base. There's some fighting here. They're like, if you expand on it, you should be okay. And I kind of was like, okay, and let it go, and just took it, you know, being 16 to 19. I was like, okay, that's cool. That means I can fight. And then when I got to like the MMA gym, I realized I could not. And so being able to be in a good headspace where over time, this is why I really think Trey is very, very important in terms of being a coach. It was like I was so persistent at wanting to be in there that it was either he realized it was maybe something I had to deal with. Like, there's something insecurity maybe that we need to remove
definitely.
Before you make that decision to get in there.
Yeah.
And over time and just training, I really hooked on to little moments of progressing rather than the idea to be in the cage. So then I was more hooked on the improving as a person in the skill that I'm doing consistently every day on a routine basis than wanting to be in front of people and show them that thing. Right? So the secret aspect that you're talking about Kung Fu is like, I understand that. Like, I really want to keep that in there. Like, I don't say anything about it. I'm like, I don't train. I have no idea. And I was like, but the only people I'm scared of are the people who are probably in that room. Yeah. They are in that room, you know? Yeah. Outside, really fine. I mean, I've even brought people in. It sounds terrible when I say it like this, just to show them that first initial, like a technique class. And they're like, they turn with the gloves, and I'm like, see, you can't do that, right? Like, and they have a very strong opinion. They're like, well, we know how to fight. And I'm like, people say that. I was that person. But it takes a while to train to just tuck your chin and like look ahead and take things differently.
Oh gosh, yeah.
And it took me a long time. I used to do the blink, and I just uncontrollably blink, and now I'm like, it's fine. But it took so long. And I remember being so angry. And same with like partners like Gomez. He was like, I would blink, and he wouldn't even hit me half the time. I would just blink, and I get so mad. I like bang my gloves together and be like, fuck. Like I would just scream, you know? And he's like, dude, it's fine.
When you're saying Gomez, are you talking about Gomi?
Yeah. Alejandro Gomez.
Well, of course.
Yeah. And I was like, a lot of the same people who are just murderers in there.
Murderers.
Are the nicest, humblest, like willing to work with you if you show effort people I've ever met. Yeah. And I was like, I need people like you and people like these guys around. Like it's like they keep you humble while also pushing you past barriers you never thought you could even achieve in the first place. And I'm like, there's no other group. Like, there's no other group I want to be around. Yeah. You know? Yeah. And I didn't know if that was, because you said you're from San Francisco. Mm-hmm. So you're not from here. No. I'm from Paola. You know that? It's like an hour away. Hour south. small country town. So when
Yeah.
I say my boy did football and I won state championship, then their son has to go play football and win state championship. And then that was something else too. They would do all those successful things for daddy who had the same thing,
Yeah.
and then get out in the real world or go to college somewhere else and go, I mean, zero out here. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, I maybe was a state champ quarterback
Yeah.
in this small town, but now I'm at a big college and no one cares.
No one cares.
No one cares. And I've seen that be really hard for people outside to, who I went to school with, like, deal with. And I'm like, I kind of hate to say that I'm glad my path went the way it did. So,
Yeah.
but I didn't know what made you come out here from San Francisco.
I wish it was more exciting, but essentially once we had our daughter, my wife and we had our daughter, I think we just needed more familial support from the wife's side, so she has a lot of family. I think her family tree, more or less, they live in like a 50-mile radius here.
Oh, okay, great.
So there's
important.
a lot of family. There's a lot of family that can nurture and build this background. I mean, I have family back home also, but it's a smaller family, and I think there's just because there are immigrants in the family who are here and there, and some are in Northern California, some are in Southern California. I think it's just more spread out. So over here we can kind of cultivate that like family upbringing, if you will, that bigger family upbringing.
Yeah.
But what's interesting when you talk about growing up in a small town and et cetera, is what was very eye-opening for me was when I moved to Los Angeles. So I don't know if you knew this, but
Nope.
I was an actor. I was an actor and a model in San Francisco and Los Angeles.
No way.
I pursued that at the same time that I was fighting in one FC or one championship.
Dang. I had no clue.
Yeah.
And I even did some digging. I was like, okay, let's do it.
I don't really talk about that side much now because, I mean, we're looking at like, what, 7 to 10 years ago was kind of like where I hit my prime in all of those things.
Gotcha.
And, I think now I'm losing my hair. It's kind of a non-point at this point. But when I moved to Los Angeles, it was because I had some momentum built in San Francisco, where I kind of, in some sense, outgrew the San Francisco market, and was like, okay, let me go to Los Angeles. And so it's actually a very funny story. Was that I was an actor in San Francisco, signed with actually a really, really, I think the top agency there.
Wow.
Yeah, and I had this video shoot for New Balance, and I was looking at the call sheet just a day and a half before, going, okay, where is this location? And so I'm researching, and I'm going, where's Santa Monica Boulevard in San Francisco? I have no, I was also, I think an Uber driver just to make ends meet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't know if I know a Santa Monica Boulevard in San Francisco, but I do know one in Los Angeles. Holy shit. We are going to Los Angeles. So I went to LA for this New Balance shoot, and it was just, it was mind blowing. I mean, in San Francisco, if you are on set, you don't see other sets in that area.
Set up.
Yeah. So like, let's say that I'm doing a photo shoot for, in San Francisco, it was more techie. So let's say I was doing one for like Visa or Comcast or something. I'm just throwing that out there. I would only see this production that I was in, but in Los Angeles, we're taking a limo to go to the shoot location, and we pass by like a big, like they closed down the freeway at one point just to make like a big, like, I don't know, probably like a blockbuster movie.
They closed the whole thing?
They closed down like a portion.
Oh my gosh, I wouldn't have guessed.
And there's like a photo shoot over there and a photo shoot over there, and then here we are. And you could see these things, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like a playground, or this is something else. And what's wild is that there are so many people even now who go to Los Angeles with a dream, because they were like a big fish in a small pond, and they go over there and they are just minnows.
Yeah.
And when I moved to Los Angeles, I felt like a minnow, but I did this New Balance shoot, and I was just like, wow, I kind of have to do this. If I'm going to take a shot, I think I have to move here to make
Yeah.
this work. Otherwise, I'm just going to be doing these smaller gigs in San Francisco that are, not as impactful.
Right.
Yeah.
And that, again, I think that's, like, you have to really look at, I don't know. I like moments like that, and like the story that you pull from it and the lesson you pull from it is essentially what was needed from that moment. It wasn't, looking back on it is a lot easier than when you're going through it.
Yeah.
But that's the more that I like kind of realized. And so when people are like having that problem, feeling like they're this big, right? Then guess where they go? Right back to where they were,
Yeah.
to where the people remember,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, you were the state champ from when you were in high school. And it's like, yep, I was. And it's like, that is a spot. I mean, I didn't have any achievements like in high school. Like I wasn't, so I got a really bad concussion in the 8th grade. So, like unconscious, like,
Oh, wow.
well, how do I put it? What's the word? I don't know if you know. I don't know if you know, but it's like you're awake, but your brain's off. So
wow.
so you're doing things and like you're making conversation and trying to do things, but you won't remember. Like the memory's gone.
Wow.
So that was from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was scary. So the situation is it's a 8th grade dummies. They make a slip and slide, and they have it lined with tires and this and that. They didn't check anything underneath. And so and by the way, before I get into the story, you're someone that I can actually, like, this driving force of conversation, like, I love it. Because it's, like, very authentic in the negative
Yeah.
and the things that learned from lessons.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think that'll be important for you guys, and it'll be important for me. Because I've told this story a few times to people, and it just doesn't really seem to hit. But in order to survive from the karate bullying into surviving middle school, where it got worse, then I was like, well, I have to use I have to figure something out. And that ended up being funny. I was like, if I can be funny, like incredibly funny, like they will leave me alone. And I figured that out over like a year, really just like perfecting it.
Yeah.
And then I was like in the group in 7th grade. And then in 8th grade, I was like really in the group. But then now in my adulthood, I was like, I wasn't popular. I was just the popular people's toy.
Oh my God.
Like I was just the guy who could be funny because no one else had anything to him. That was you? Did you develop a sense of like comedy or like just to be?
Yeah, I was the class clown.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the way. That was the only way, because I can't be cool enough. I
Yeah.
can't be good looking enough.
Mhm.
I can't be athletic enough. I mean,
Same.
because those jocks. There are those jocks who can actually do it, who get the girl, and all those things, and
Oh yeah.
whose parents have money to make them, they dressed better and whatever.
Oh yeah.
And we were. I mean, I think I rotated between 2 pairs of pants.
Yeah.
And I was probably smelly. I think I'm lucky in the sense that being Asian, I think the stereotype is that I don't have body odor. So I guess I wasn't smelly in the sense that I didn't like sweat out any BO
Profusely.
but
Yeah.
but good grief, like I mean I
would do kung fu, and I wouldn't.
so being funny was the way to survive.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
literally a thing that you develop, and I didn't realize that until later. And then I realized that, yeah, maybe it was defensive then, but now I can make a lot of friends. like now it's awesome, right? But back then that's what it was. I was just the plaything.
Yeah.
And so part of being the plaything was I was they were like, I think they threw something in the middle of the slip and slide or whatever, and they were like, hey Chase, could you grab that? We want to like play football.
Of course.
We got to practice before this. And as I'm going through it, like they had like timed the signal, and then like all the jocks were like, we can mess with Chase, he's the toy.
Yeah.
Literally hit me, knocked me out, flat out. So I went from up to down like quick, and there was a big rock underneath it, right on temple, like right here. And there was no pain, there was no shock, like nothing was like weird after that. And I was like, that really should have hurt. Like I should have like, ow, like headache or something.
Yeah.
Nope. And immediately it was like I got the blurred vision. So like the top half of my eyes was blurry and the bottom half I could see. So I kept doing this. And I thought it was soap, like from the slide. And then I'm like, let me just go inside. I'm not feeling good. And then from what I had been told, that's when I started kind of coming in and out, and then threw up for like 30 minutes in there and kept passing out and throwing up, passing out. And then finally, the mom found me in the bathroom because I didn't even close the door. And she's like, oh my gosh. And she like grabs me and is like, what's going on? And then I remember very vividly because I had this red, like, beginning touchscreen phone. And I was like, I handed it to her. I go, my parents are in Denver. Call my grandparents. They're watching me. She heard gibberish. Like, it wasn't any kind of language.
Wow.
So I had no speech. So they were like, oh my gosh, we don't know what to do. And I remember, like, I heard, like, going to the hospital. And they put me in a car. And then it was red. And that's all I remember. And then 4 hours go by where I'm falling on myself. My parents, I'm in a wheelchair. And they're going to wheel me in. And my parents, she called my parents, who then told them, call the grandparents. And, you know, I woke up 4 hours later on a metal bed, like a metal table, with no clothes on. Like, no clothes. Like, not even, like, covered.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I'm like, and with, like, these lights, like, on me. And I go, what's going on? I immediately,
Surprise.
like, grab myself. I go, what? Because it's also nothing but nurses.
Yeah.
And they're female nurses.
Oh.
And you know, this should have been my first clue that I probably wasn't in the right mind. But they go, like, you know when you talk to a toddler? Hi there. That's what they did to me. They go, oh, look who it is. And I go, why are you talking to me like that?
Yeah.
Like, and they slowly realize, they're like, can we have the doctor? Doctor comes in. And he goes, oh, you feeling better? I go, I don't know what's happening. I was like, why am I naked? And he goes, yeah, could we get you like a towel or something? I go, clothes maybe. And he was like, they brought out like a towel. And then I just remember like shivering completely. And then, you know, they told my parents, they were like, we can't see anything on the CAT scan, but we think we should go for an MRI. We think there's something in there. This is super serious. And then the blessing was there was nothing. The MRI had nothing, no bleed, no damage, no nothing. And they were like, this is the weirdest. Everyone was like, this is the weirdest head injury with no trauma we've ever seen. Wow. And so my parents were very much like, you can't do any sports now. That could get worse. So then they pulled me out of everything athletic that was also tying me into the group.
The group, yeah.
And then I was no longer included because I got hurt at the party where the group were at. And so they were like, we need to find a new toy. And then I was just immediately gone. Damn. And I was like, ooh, like it was and I couldn't even, you know, you're in the 8th grade. I'm like, I'm not confident in me. Like I've been the play toy for a while. And so it was like finding that and then realizing I couldn't do anything athletic, but I knew that there was something in there, like a driving force that I could really tap into that people didn't have. And I was like, I think that was the blessing from all the moments like that, which allowed me to do things that people would call, whether it's crazy or, you know, that would never happen, right? And it's like anything can happen. Like you just have to never quit. Yeah. Adjust, never quit, and just keep it moving. And so, like I said, I'm really blessed that happened the way it did.
Yeah.
Obviously with no brain damage, but when I told my parents I was, you know, doing MMA and training, they were like, are you serious? And I'm like, yeah. I'm like 22, 23. I'm like, yeah, I'm an adult, so I'm going to make the call for myself. And I was like, about that same period where you were, you know, showed that kindness at 6-7 months in, I was like, I don't even want to do the vanity thing. I just want to be able to see and do things like Nathan just did to me. You know, so it's just funny that whole story just comes full circle from the lessons to adolescence and growing up and then being in that spot where like they still may have that small town mentality of like that's their vanity. And I'm like, I don't need that. I just need built relationships that are important to me and things that my kiddo can learn from and we're in this room. And so thank you, Nathan.
Well, of course. Wow. I can't even imagine having something like that to kind of, I mean, it seems like the concussion was a big turning point. Yeah. Wow. I didn't have anything like that. I mean, the big thing for me was like my 8th grade summer. I was bored. I was really bored.
Just bored.
So bored. And my friend and I, we started sharing some martial arts ideas and techniques.
Mm-hmm.
And he taught me how to throw my first hook, taught me how to throw a roundhouse kick. Because in Kung Fu you don't actually learn that stuff. Because
It's just forms.
I'm learning forms,
Oh
like
yeah.
forms, stuff that'll look pretty on camera, but have no actual practical value.
Yeah.
And rewinding the clock in fifth grade, I was playing, in the playground with my friends, and this is wild, and I don't think he'll ever hear this, which is crazy. We're friends on Facebook. I have a friend, Eric.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I thought we were friends, but we were like kind of playing roughly, and then I smacked him. And this
Oh.
was in fifth grade. I smacked him really, really hard on accident, and I was like I froze, wanted to say I was like, I'm sorry, like that was an accident. Didn't mean to hit you so hard.
Yeah.
And he was like, "You want to fight?" And I was like, "No, I don't want to fight. You're freaking my friend."
You're like, no,
Yeah. And everyone's like, "Nathan, use your kung fu on him." And I'm like, "Oh,
it's a secret.
it's it's a secret, but I actually don't know how to use this. I literally do not know what am I gonna use crane? Am I gonna use tiger? Because
Yeah,
none
you
of these
don't
things actually work, or at least I've never been taught how these things work.
Right.
And I just remembered in that moment where he's kind of like pushing me a little bit and like, "Hey, you want to fight, Nate? Like, fuck you. And I'm like, "Oh my God, I don't know how to do this." And I was just in my head thinking of all the things that I learned in Kung Fu. And I'm like, what can I apply here? And I was just thinking, I can apply nothing. I have no idea what could happen.
Oh my gosh, how helpless.
I was helpless. And everyone was like, "But Nathan knows Kung Fu.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he could probably kill you, Eric. Like, just step back."
Yeah.
And I'm like, thank God that nothing happened.
Yeah.
um,
You were like, Eric, you were safe.
yeah.
You were safe.
And Eric was also smaller than me too. So it was like, what is happening here? Like,
Mhm.
I'm terrified right now because I have no idea how I could apply any of this Kung Fu. So then, yeah, in eighth grade, my friend David and we started just training together because we were bored. When you're going from eighth grade to ninth grade, there's just nothing to do.
I had video games.
Oh.
That's literally all I did this whole summer. I remember 9 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. My parents, for one reason or another, we couldn't afford it.
Mm-hmm.
We could, couldn't afford it, and B, didn't want to afford it. My dad. So, I mean, he would buy workout equipment for me, which is crazy. I mean, it all kind of paid off in the end.
Right.
Because I became a strength and conditioning coach and an MMA fighter and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So it worked out really well. But at that time, I was like, man, everyone else is playing video games. And I think even now, when I have friends who talk about like video games, I'm out of the loop because I don't have that background.
Yeah, you're like, sure, I've heard of it.
I've heard of it.
I've heard of it.
So Dave and I we would train and we would learn how to fight essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And what's wild is that I would say most of and I'm not saying that I didn't learn anything from my official instructors,
Mm-hmm.
but the relationship that I have with David, we kind of cultivate, and we still share things to this day.
Yeah.
We're like, "Oh, look at this technique," or "Look at this," and we use that to kind of essentially make a little lab for ourselves. We're like, "Okay, let's figure this out."
Mm-hmm.
We created this team called GSD, which is called Garage Self-Defense.
I was going to ask about the garage thing.
Yeah, it was out of my parents' garage and his parents' garage because he was just down the street. And we would just practice. I mean, at first we would practice Bruce Lee's 1-inch punch on coffee cans.
I love this.
And we would whatever you could find in movies, we were just like, let's see if this works.
Mm-hmm.
Let's like try this. Oh, we saw Rocky doing this, in training. Let me try to chop wood, or let me
Right.
do whatever, they were doing. And, there was just this big learning process. We didn't have YouTube at the time.
Right.
So we were just figuring it out by watching whatever we could find. And
that's an amazing story right there in itself,
And so while we still had instructors, we still went to martial arts schools. Most of our learning was done in that lab, in the garage, in my parents' garage. And
amazing.
What's wild is that in both of my 1FC fights, my one championship fights, they were trained in my parents' garage still.
That is.
And when my parents had to remodel their garage or whatever they were doing, I did in my parents' driveway, right in front of their door.
I was gonna make a joke that said then it moved to driveway and self-defense.
It did move
But
to the
it actually
driveway,
moved to the driveway.
but that was like 90% of my training.
That is insane. It,
Yeah.
it really is crazy, but it's actually not crazy at the same time, because if you have the thing that you and was it David share, it's that's the perfect opportunity to like find new things, because it's like that's what I would do with my buddy in the same time period. We would just like find new ways to be better at the game online, and we would practice inside of like lobbies where it was just us. Like that's a good vantage point, you know? And it's like, it's fun with like classic video games or this or that, but it's like, there's that, kid-like place where you can find like hidden gems inside these situations. Yes. And I'm like, I realize that you can still do that as an adult. I'm like, you can still like find that thing. It just becomes a little more difficult to find a David, or my buddy was Kaiser. So, to be able to have that situation or that event to where you could find it together, and I think it just rounds off back to the same same vanity situation. It's just like people get like in the rut, they like it, and then that's it, and they're like, that's what we do, and it's like, yeah, but for whatever reason, and I'll pitch the same question to you. I was just very different from the idea my parents, I think, had for what they wanted from me.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if that's the same for you with being in Kung Fu and then having this training, if your dad wanted you to pursue it.
No.
Or was he just like, I just wanted to have self-defense? Was he like, you're going to fight?
No.
Like, was he?
He definitely didn't want me to fight. So I quit Kung Fu in 8th grade. And then in 9th grade, in this garage where we would have this lab, we started hosting, and I say we, Dave and I would host weekly fight clubs in this garage, my parents' garage, every Friday.
This is getting good.
And I would look forward to this every Friday. Mm-hmm. And what was wild was that was also how I found out that I could kick people in the legs. I didn't know this. So I remember Dave and I like started the first round, and I think he used like a sweep on my leg, because I don't think he was kicking my leg. And I remember going, wow, that was interesting. So then the next round, I'm going against another friend, and I started kicking him in the legs. I was like, okay, I tried to replicate the sweep, but for whatever reason, the sweep didn't come natural to me, but the kick was. Yeah. And I would throw these kicks, and I'm like, oh my God, I can hit kind of hard
with my legs.
Yeah. And, so what's wild is that, now the leg kick is one of my big moves. Just kicking in general is just one of my big things.
It's to me, it was a shock because we use it, it's very practical. We use it a lot in training. We're like, I do Muay Thai at Shoot in Lenexa, and it's like very essential. And it's like, you can set up a lot with it. You can use it to do damage. Yeah. You can use it to have another layer of like a feint if you wanted to. Yeah. You can use a lot. And to me, it was a shock that it took this long, like 4 or 5 years ago. Probably 4 years ago. It was when I first started hearing on UFC. Well, these kicks are really changing the game. And I'm like, have you not watched one? Like, have you not watched any other thing? Like, it's all they use. And, that's when I started making that shift between UFC and, One. Because I love watching every Muay Thai on One. And I'm like, it's because of not only the story and the culture of where the martial art is from and why it's so important, and the respect between both of them. Yes. It's a big deal. Mm-hmm. And in the UFC, it's like, let's make money. Let's just fight it out, right? And it's like, there is some technique. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying it's not the same as two people who respect each other to be in there. Yes. And at the end of the day, it's just part of the gig. Yes. And I respect you 100% regardless, unless you're a complete, D-bag, and you don't deserve that. But being in the cage with me as we fight, that's the respect. And it's very important that's very different. Yeah,
I think that's why I naturally gravitated towards One, in that I appreciate the respect part. I think naturally, and I think we can kind of relate in this, I'm not going to bark at someone.
Yeah, no.
And you would at least say that you would find that more in the UFC than in 1FC.
Yeah.
Not saying that anyone's better. I would even go ahead and say that, there's just the talent pool in the UFC is just so vast.
Yeah.
But I think culturally, I just connect more to one.
Yeah.
And so that worked out really well.
Yeah.
I didn't even know. I mean, I think when I first signed with one, I was surprised because when they reached out to me, I was absolutely a nobody.
Well, yeah, I saw that. I was looking you up. Your first fight is at one.
Mm-hmm.
What in the world? I
Yeah.
was like, no offense to the garage training. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that, like,
No.
whoa, that's a big deal.
So David and I, we were, best friends. And then we had kind of like a falling out in high school. We kind of like did like the gang thing.
What was that? You did the gang thing?
We did the gang thing just because I think at that time we were both pretty lost, lost teenagers in like what we wanted to do. Because at the end of the day, no one really, like your average high schooler doesn't really respect martial artists. It's kind of an out there thing. So I think to kind of more settle whatever was like going on inside, we did these little extracurriculars, if you will, like the gang life. So we had a kind of a falling out just because, like we had legal issues and whatever.
Yeah.
But then our senior year, we reconnected and joined Muay Thai. So we did Muay Thai for a couple of years where we just focused on that. And then I think about a year in, my Muay Thai coach at the time, he was like, hey, this is this guy, I want you to spar him. He's in town because I'm training him for this fight. He's a K1 fighter, pro boxer, and also like a second degree, third degree karate, like black belt. But
you're
like
a senior?
I just graduated high school.
Still young.
Yeah, but it was my first full year of Muay Thai, so I was probably, I think this was, we could even say this was November after high school had ended.
Okay, got it.
So 5 months out of high school or so. And I was just like, God, this guy's huge.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like $145. This guy's kind of big, and he's a pro boxer and, whatever credentials, and he's fighting in K1 next weekend or whatever. So I just want you to give him some like good looks. I'm like, I have no looks.
Yeah. You're like, look at him.
And I just remember the round started and I was just getting like battered. And then at some point, I kind of like flipped this switch where I was like, I gotta survive.
Yeah.
And I just remembered I would like start leg kicking and throwing, and I just kind of went blank for a little bit. But what's wild was that person, who fights in Asia, I think even still, was basically, had connections to people, and one was like, hey, there's this kid, don't know what he's doing now.
Holy cow.
But he's special, or like he's got some skills. Think you want to look at him. And so at that time, before Chatri was Chatri, the CEO of One, there was also Victor Cooey at the time, who's since moved on, but he reached out to me. It's kind of like at that time it was like Dana White reaching out to you.
Yeah, that's what I assumed. I'm like, holy cow, he reached out to you.
Reached out to me and was like, hey, heard about you. Can you send me some of your footage? And so I sent him some stuff, or I did pancration tournaments. Pancration was just, we could just think of it like amateur MMA.
Okay.
But it was point fighting in the sense that they counted certain strikes, but they didn't count others. And the strikes that they actually didn't count were leg kicks.
Oh, joy.
And I was such a good leg kicker. So, I just remembered like sending him footage, and he was like, okay,
like, you got it.
Here's this contract. And I'm like, is this legit? Like this whole time I'm thinking, this can't be real, because this is a Singapore-based organization.
Yep.
And I am nobody. Well, at that time I was an actor, so at least I had that going for me.
Yeah.
But I didn't feel like a fighter, in the sense that, because if you look at like a marathon MMA folks, you have like your Gomi, your Nick, your help me out here.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's everyone
Mason.
in there. Mason, you have, like, for example, I know that on April 22nd, so the production company that runs this is going to be the corner sponsor for that event.
Yeah.
And so, I know Mason and Ollie have one coming up.
Okay. Oh my God. I can't believe I'm blanking on his name right now. 5-0.
Zach Scroggins?
Yes. Oh my God.
My gosh.
Like you have these monsters who kind of like go work up the ranks who do it the right way, right?
Yeah.
And I didn't do it the right way, so I never felt legit.
Mm,
Um,
I see that.
and I think that's why I didn't even believe that it was happening. So then when I finally got the call to like, oh, here's an actual opponent, I was like, oh my God. Like, when they pitched the opponent to me, it was Matt Hume who reached out to me. Matt Hume, for the folks who don't know, is Demetrius Johnson's coach. He's the matchmaker for one, and he himself is a legend.
Yeah.
In Pancration or Pancrase or whatever, he is a legend, and he reached out and was like, "Hey Nathan, have this opponent for you in the featherweight division. This guy is the essentially the spokesperson or the top dog of Zendokai Karate in Taiwan. Like he owns his school. He's like the head of the organization in his karate thing, 2nd degree black belt or whatever.
He wants you to fight.
Yeah, and I'm like, who am I? At that time, I had just moved to Los Angeles, like maybe a few months before that.
Yeah.
And I was just pursuing that full on. I'm not doing anything else. I'm just gonna be an actor life. And they're like, we have this fight for you, and I'm like, oh my God, 2nd degree black belt. I don't even like what.
Did it feel like they were feeding you to this guy? Like, did you ever have that feeling like, oh my gosh, it isn't legit because they're just feeding him food?
Yes, it did. But at the same time, I had such, I don't know if it's confidence. It's just, I think it's just being in my 20s and just not knowing my limits.
Yeah.
And I was just like, well, I've done a lot of things as an actor that I have no business doing. One of them was like I did like a car commercial where I was like the guy driving, the car. And, when you're on a big production like that, it doesn't even feel real.
Yeah.
It is just, I mean, I just remembered like being in the breakfast line. They're like, Mr. Ng, please. Like the whole line moves for you so that you can like get food. You have your trailer. Like it was, you feel like a celebrity. So then at that time, it was just, it felt like it was part of the package. Like the one championship thing was like, wow, I've been accruing the success. This is just part of it. Let's just see what happens. And what's nice was that in that fight, I just knew like I had to take it to the ground because the guy was such a, I looked him up and I found this fight of this dude that I was fighting where he took like a 360 like jumping spin kick to the head and just like shrugged it off and laughed. And I was like, oh God, this guy has a chin.
Yeah.
I have nothing for this dude.
Yeah.
But, obviously that fight worked out, in my favor. But, the next guy that I fought, I really did feel like, wow, they're feeding me this dude. Or I'm being fed
to him.
Yeah. This guy that I ended up fighting in my second fight he was the featherweight tournament champion. So ONE FC did this thing where they had a bunch of featherweights fight and, back-to-back fights. And he was the winner of this.
Oh, joy.
So he had like, multiple fights under his belt, but he had that like featherweight tournament champion under his belt.
Yeah.
And, he had crazy power. And I just remembered like when we were doing our media day, I like whispered to one of the guys, I was like, am I supposed to be the can here? Like, am I the can in this? Like, am I supposed to be killed? And the guy was like, no, I think they think it's going to be like an even matchup. And I'm like, all right. What's wild is that this person ends up, fighting like one of the champions or whatever, and does pretty well with him too. I don't know what he's doing now, but it's just wild like that I crossed paths with people that I probably had no business being in the ring with. I'm not sure. I don't really know.
Nathan, you definitely deserve to be in there. I'm just saying that like that's where my discrepancy between UFC and ONE came from, because it was like ONE where it's located, it's very different over there than here. It's like a really big deal. And I was like looking up like, why aren't there more Muay Thai? I love Muay Thai stuff. Why aren't there more Muay Thai people, like fighters who are in the UFC? And it's like, well, they start when they're 9 or 10, and that's how they put food on the table. Yeah. And then they fight all the way until they're 20-something, combat, like war, all the way through. It's like, by that time, they're like, okay, like, okay, we might be done. It's
Yeah.
like, so that's just, but that's really good for that organization. But I was going to say that you definitely deserve to be in there.
Yeah.
I saw both of them.
Um, what's wild is that when I fought that guy, I just remembered I had the jitters. I could not fight the jitters, the pre-fight jitters,
Mm-hmm.
going into that match just because of the weigh-ins.
Mm.
I got spooked. Probably have never really shared this publicly before, but we show up at the actual weigh-ins, and I'm like, okay, we're about the same size.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go to the ceremonial weigh-ins, and I'm like, this guy's massive.
Yeah.
He has like the biggest back, and he just did not look. He was just a killer, and he barked at me. He actually barked at me during the the face off, and I was just like,
Like a dog bark.
yeah. And
Like
I was like, and I got so scared. I got so scared I didn't even get on the bus after.
Oh my god.
Because we had a bus to go to the ceremonial weigh-ins, which were, they were at like the middle of like a mall, like the mall or something, right?
Oh, okay.
So then there's
That's
like
where they were
there's
at.
just thousands of people there, and I was just like, this guy just barked at me, and I'm like, I'm so scared right now.
Yeah.
So I was like, hey, David,
Yeah.
I was like, hey, let's find our way back to the hotel.
Yeah.
Please, can we do that? Let's like go back and like hit the mitts a little bit. I just need to shake this off. But I was totally scared of this dude.
Wow.
Um,
I mean, to be honest, I'm not saying wow like wow, Nathan's scared. I'm saying wow like yeah, I'd be terrified too. Well, also I didn't realize that there was such a big discrepancy when you weigh in and then when get rehydrated and fueled and everything. I'm like, you can gain how much
yeah.
in 24 hours? And I'm like, with this dude.
And what was wild is that I don't even know. I mean, this could be. I don't think one is going to watch this, so I'm just going to share this here. Uh, at that time, drug testing was pretty loosey goosey, if
Yeah.
you will, or non-existent.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's changed now.
Yeah.
But one takes care of you though. So when
I've heard that.
when you show up, when your plane lands, you have like the person who like, you ride a limo or whatever to your hotel destination. They give you money, they give you a cell phone, they give you a translator or a tour guide or both.
Wow.
Yeah, and so I had a translator / tour guide person who would, take me around everywhere, and he knew my opponent's translator / tour guide. And so the night before, he was like, "Hey Nathan, don't want to scare you, but do want to bring this to your attention. Your opponent refused to do a blood test, thinking it was a drug test. So we all got like a prick." A finger prick to test for hepatitis and AIDS.
Yeah.
Just so that we're not spreading that in the cage
With each other. That's great. Yeah.
and
That's a
he
good
was
thing.
like, absolutely no blood work. And come to find out though is that he was just completely juiced out of like, and had like the IV, I think, refueling or whatever. So that's why he was just so much more massive.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, this is a superhuman.
Yeah, this is Superman in front of me. The small version.
Found out later, yeah, that like, I contacted someone that he knew or that knows him and was just like, yeah, they have these, because he's from China.
Mm-hmm.
They have these like Chinese scientists who essentially turn these Chinese like fight camps, turn these athletes into superhumans.
Yeah.
Those were the words, like super soldier.
Yeah.
And I was just like, how do I compete? My second fight, I trained in my parents' driveway.
You were like, I was in the driveway.
I was training on my parents'
The
driveway.
garage was getting remodeled. I had to move the driveway.
Yeah, I moved to the driveway, which had less space. And I had just gotten married. And most of my day-to-day was we made a bunch of IKEA trips because, my wife and I didn't live together before getting married. So when we got married, it was like, we had to buy all the things, and
You're like, we don't have a couch.
so we didn't have a couch, we didn't have a bed, so it was like IKEA trip. Oh, let me go to my parents' house to punch mitts in the driveway, and then go back to IKEA Swedish meatballs. And then meanwhile, on the other side of the globe is this guy who's turning into like a super soldier.
Yeah.
And that was the context in which that I took my second professional fight, which is like so wild. Obviously I didn't perform. I would say that I basically shut down.
Yeah.
Because I was just
That's a lot to know too. Like you were
yeah,
like,
it
oh
was
my gosh.
it was a lot to know the night before.
Yeah.
But I still felt like, and I think what killed me for good 7 years was that thinking in my head that I still think I'm more talented than him. I
Mm-hmm.
still think that I could have, if I was in a different headspace,
Yeah.
I think I could have killed him.
Yeah.
um, and this is kind of an interesting segue into, moving to the Midwest and meeting Trey.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was gonna go to different jujitsu academies just to, build some sort of network because I was very lonely when we first moved here.
Yeah.
Because, my wife has her family tree here. I had no one.
Right.
I was so isolated. So I was like, okay, let me go to a martial arts place to like build friends. And I just remembered going to the gym in Lee Summit, and there was the instructor who was a purple belt at the time, and I was a purple belt. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to learn from him, and we're going to probably be on the same level or whatever. Absolutely not. That instructor was Trey,
Oh
and
my god.
and I was just like, everything that I did was just completely shut down, and I was like, wow, whatever he's doing, I got to learn from him.
Yeah.
I don't care about like the gyms and like the academies or whatever. I want to learn from this guy. So then when he opened
Amazing story.
when he opened his academy during COVID, I think I was like, I have to go.
Yeah.
Like I have to learn from him. He seems to have like a grasp of this in a different way than the other people.
Right.
But yeah, it was very, very eye-opening. But what was interesting is during one of our sessions in Lee Summit, Trey sat down with me and just talked to me about like pre-fight jitters, and I'm sure all of the marathon MMA guys have probably been through some level of this talk before, where essentially this is your body preparing you, your brain preparing you for combat. And I think I didn't have that awareness back then, where I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm freezing up.
Yeah.
I think that if I had that pep talk from Trey, brought back into, if we were like to, essentially
Let's Marty McFly this thing and go
exactly,
back to the future.
I think I would have, beat Lee Kaiwen, my second fight, and things would have changed. And what's wild was that for the 6-7 years after my loss in Singapore, I had essentially just kept in contact with one. They're like, oh, what's your weight? My weight is 145 or 150 or whatever. I'm ready, short notice, whatever. But it never solidified into anything.
Yeah.
Until now, possibly. And we'll just leave it there.
Okay.
But nothing has actually solidified until now. And I think I'm in a different headspace. I think some people know that I took an MMA fight in June. And that was essentially, in my mind, was going to be my last fight. It was going to redeem that loss.
Yeah.
Because in that loss, it wasn't about the performance. It was about like my headspace.
Yeah.
And I wanted to be in a different headspace approaching that MMA fight. And I also wanted to utilize all these things that I learned from Trey.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I didn't get to do any of that because it was a quick knockout. And I think my opponent and I were pretty disappointed in the outcome of that fight.
Yeah.
I was disappointed too, because I was like, it would have been a very interesting match to fight someone who was so good at wrestling. And I don't know. I didn't know what could happen. And obviously I landed a head kick that was supposed to be just an arm kick, but I got lucky.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's why there's still like this big question mark of like, how good am I actually? Like what is my potential?
Yeah.
And I'm curious about that as I see my athletic attributes fade away. I mean, Father Time is undefeated. I'm going to be 37 soon.
No way.
Yes. So,
okay, I thought for real you were maybe 31.
I wish I was 31. When I was 31, I was very special. I just naturally I had gifts. I see them fade away, and it's fine because I've traded a lot of those physical, in some sense, watching my athletic attributes kind of fade away, but incoming is that I'm gaining insight. I'm gaining wisdom, and I'm gaining, the love of becoming a father.
Yeah.
And it doesn't hurt. It doesn't sting as much.
Yeah.
But it is this reality in the sense that, I'm watching the gifts go away. And it's a very weird realization, because I still feel like me. It still looks like me, but it's not as much me as I think it was.
Well, and I think there's something beautiful in fatherhood in that way, is that, it's like, yeah, you may see some things. It's the same way when people talk to me, you're like, how do you have a kid? And what is that like? Yeah. And I'm like, you have someone who needs you 24/7. I was like, but I was 16 when he got here.
Yeah.
And, he had health problems for about 2 years. We were in and out of Children's Mercy. I was trying to graduate, right? And so an hour away and all the way to Kansas City. School, get out of school, drive to the hospital, spend the night there at the hospital, drive to school, boom, boom, boom. So that was for like 6 months when he had a diaphragmatic surgery. So they had to go in, repair everything. And, the recovery was insane. We left, most people have a 9-pound baby when they're born. We left at 6 months when he was still 9 pounds. Wow. So it was like, they were just really thankful that he didn't have to go home on a tube.
Wow.
And so it was like, at such young kids, and I was like, that's what did it. Like, this guy's going to need me all the time. And I'm like, I'm not going anywhere. And so then you start to like, it's never really had those, in your 20s type stuff. Because there's no one depending on you. It's like, I've always had someone who needed me. And it was like, yeah, I guess you could say I grew up really quick, but I'm also still a child. Look at my room. You know what I'm saying? Like, look at the room. Yeah. And it's just, there's this beautiful thing where you're like, that's okay. If that's got to go, that's got to go, because I have kids. I have a kid now, And it's like, you're very willing to let that go. Or I like to think they're not the decision maker, but you get to have that, like, is this going to benefit me or is it going to benefit us?
Yes.
Yeah. And it's like, that made me also more grateful to be in relationships and in rooms of people who that was also reciprocated in Glory, I guess, Trey's Marathon MMA. It's like, oh, wow. It's like, these guys really care about me too, even though they have 4-0, 5-0, they're coming up. Like, these guys are very talented, but it'll take time to like improve me too. And I'm like, I don't get that outside. I don't get that in the real life. I don't get that in my job. I don't get that anywhere else. I'm like, well, I'm not going anywhere. It was like the same feeling I had when I had my kiddo. I'm like, I'm here for the long haul. Like, I'm here for him. And I was like, how can I contribute to these guys, in any way possible? And I was like, well, what skills do I have? And you start to troubleshoot the things that you have, and you get to find something over time that you love. And I love doing this. And this leads to developing relationships with people who are in the MMA community. So I couldn't be more grateful.
What's interesting about the MMA community, right, is that it's just so vast and so diverse. Yeah. You have so many different walks of life who find this. I think there are some common denominators, and I feel like some of the common denominators are usually people come from some level of like a troubled past, right? Because there's a reason why you want to get good at fighting.
Yeah, there's a reason.
There's a reason, whether you're bullied or something. There's something you got to work out there. And I think a lot of the expression of that and the fulfillment of that I see in the culture that Trey has developed.
Yeah.
And I think I really connect with that. And I think that's why when I go there, but I don't know, when I go there, I'm also pretty scared because I'm like, God, you have killers. I could go down the list. I mean, there's also Heston, there's Graham. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh my God, please, I do not want any rounds with these guys today.
You're like, no. Like, please.
Yeah. Just killers all around. And I think that, but going back is that there is like a common denominator is that, we all have some sort of history in which we kind of want to work out. And I find that, I don't know, I really connect with a room like that. It does kind of get scary sometimes because like this is also a room where like you can punch each other in the face.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I don't want to tick anyone off today. I'm too old for this,
Right.
I mean, in my when I was preparing for the fight, I was also working. So I'm a corporate consultant right now.
Oh,
Which,
wow.
yeah, it's very, very weird. Like, so I'm a desk jockey also. Um,
I, I'm so sorry. I don't mean to laugh, but I was like, I've seen you in the gym and I've seen videos. I'm like, it's like, oh, hello. Like, just very quiet at the
yeah,
desk. And
and
I'm like, whoa.
no one knows. I don't talk about that over
Oh,
there.
I guess so.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
so I'm just living that corporate consultant life, and I'm just trying to put food on the table.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's just so wild, like being there and being in that space where everyone is so dialed in,
Yeah.
and then here I am just going like, hey, I don't even know if I like should be doing this anymore. Like I just need to do my job and whatever. But I would, try to fit in this crazy work schedule with training
Mm-hmm.
for an MMA fight against someone who was like trying to like beat me up. And
Yeah.
I think what's wild is that I didn't keep that same perspective because once I won that last MMA fight in June,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't keep that perspective when I got offered a Muay Thai fight that I just fought in I think 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, the 11th, I think is what it said.
Yeah. So I just fought in a professional Muay Thai fight. Didn't go very well.
Yeah.
So what happened was I don't know. I was just so overconfident, you know.
Mm.
I my sister was there in my corner and so was David.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, "What do you want us to say to you in between rounds?" And I'm like, "There's no in between rounds.
Yeah.
It'll be a round one." Like I
Oh, no
just
big deal. I'll knock him out right
I
away.
did not even entertain the idea of a second round, and I didn't reflect on that in my training, which is
Wow.
like you should not do that. Like for every young fighter watching,
Mm-hmm.
you should prepare. Like if it's a 5 round fight or a 3 round fight, prepare for that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Don't prepare for a first round knockout just because you had success before.
Right.
And I think that was like one of my big shortcomings was I I'm kind of embarrassed sharing this, but whenever I would, get to that state in training where I'd get like kind of tired,
Mm-hmm.
like where you're like really getting winded,
Yeah.
I would pull back.
Mm.
Whereas before, I would kind of lean into it and like kind of push into it.
Ride with it.
For this one, I was like, let me just chill for a little bit,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I paid the price. I
Mm-hmm.
paid the price because round one happened. I had some initial success. I saw him wobbled. I believe in his because the guy posted about it on Facebook, but the opening seconds of the fight, I broke his ribs with a kick.
Wow.
And
That makes sense from the sound.
I expect I not. It sounds very like hubristic of me to say that I expected it,
Uh-huh.
but I did expect it.
Yeah.
I did expect to throw a kick in it, kind of damaging some, because
Yeah.
I have never thrown that kick, my left kick, and at full power at someone and they not be affected.
Right.
It's like broken a leg before or broken ribs plenty of times. So I didn't, I was like, okay, I'm gonna throw that left kick at his ribs. That's pretty much gonna. But he was so motivated that he was like, you can't kill me.
Yeah.
So I hit him with the left kick, and I'm like, should be going down soon. Wow, he barely even winced. And I didn't realize that he held in like a broken rib, and I would like throw like a big punch at him that would normally just knock someone out,
Yeah.
and I would see him wobble and still keep coming forward. I'm like, oh my god,
You were like,
this is like that nightmare.
yeah, this
That
is the worst nightmare
that
ever.
nightmare of like you punching someone in your dream and like nothing's happening to them.
Yes.
That was what was going on, was that like I would see him get wobbled for like a split set, like a little bit. He kept coming forward, and I'm like, oh my god, this is
the
bad.
worst news.
This is bad. And then round one ended, and I'm like, I'm completely toast.
Mm.
Like I have barely any energy left, and I see him with the stool, and my corner forgets to get my stool, and I'm like, oh my god, I just want to sit down. Like I'm so tired, and I'm just standing up, leaning against the cage, just thinking, I am completely exhausted right now. I hope that we finish this in round two. So round two begins, and I'm just like, I'm still trying to throw like the heavy shots to take him out of there, and he didn't go down.
Wow.
So I think by the middle of the second round, I was like, I just want to survive. Like I'm so tired.
Mm.
But luckily, I still have some defense
Mm-hmm.
that I could like lean on,
Yeah.
so I was able to avoid a lot of punishment. Thank God, because that was like the worst case scenario for how I
Yep.
expected that fight to be.
Yeah.
And um,
I think it's hilarious that you said that's a nightmare because I'm like, I've had those nightmares so often.
so often,
But they went, like, I haven't had those since, I mean, I used to have them all the time, middle school, high school. It was like, who's that person that's doing it to me? It's like, I can't do anything.
yeah, there's
So,
there's always those guys. I mean, you'll see like someone's record, if you watch like boxers or whatever. They're
mm,
like 27-0 with 26 knockouts. And I'm like, who's that one guy?
yeah.
And there's always that one guy who could take your shot.
Yeah.
And another like little like tidbit of wisdom that, I've now experienced is that the hardest shots you could throw are not shots where you're throwing full power.
Mm-hmm.
They are, the fast ones, the surprise ones. But when you're actually trying to throw hard, you won't because
Yeah.
you're so tense and whatever. And I think that I would just like contract and like, I'm like, oh my God, this is going to kill him, you know?
And he's like, bink.
Yeah. And it would wobble at best,
Yeah.
if even. I mean, the crowd would hear it, but it wasn't that shot that would like clear someone's clock.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just so much wasted energy. And it was just like that bad dream that I would find someone who could take my shot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something else that Muay Thai taught me. I keep forgetting his name. But it's on Instagram. He's very popular now. And I found him early on and have watched, but I realized that people kept telling me that I could reach them with my jab. And I'm like, really? I'm not even really, it's just there. Like my body goes, jab. And it just like pops out and there's a jab. And then I learned that in Muay Thai, it's very loose. It's a very loose, quick. And then I was like, what if I do that? And then they were like, whoa. They were like, there's some speed and power behind it. I'm like, it's like I do that every time. Like I just like make sure I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh, it's loose. I can pop it, really extend to the end of it and then back.
Those
And
are
they're
the
like,
best shots.
yeah. And I was like, those are better? I was like, oh, thank you,
Yeah.
Instagram Muay Thai teacher that I can't remember right now. But I really don't know. I wish I could tell you when these things die. But I just assume an hour and a half.
Yeah.
Does it feel like it's been an hour and a half?
I'm not sure.
Yeah,
I actually have no idea. I
Yeah.
have no sense of time right now.
it is that's that perfect answer. Because people go, no, or like, I don't know. And you were like, it's just that's the podcast lock is what I call it. Because it's like, this matters, right? Nothing else outside does, but like this.
Nothing else matters. And, it's just very interesting. I'm processing this like loss too. I think I'm actually talking about this with someone else, not my wife, for the first time. So,
I appreciate it
it's
because this was amazing for me.
yeah,
So this was so neat.
very therapeutic to go on about that, just because, it eats at me, of course, just because I feel like I should have won that. I mean, I think I'm supposed to be, more well-rounded and etc. But I just,
We also, yeah, but also like I noticed that the guys in the gym and me and you, it's like they're like, wow, this is amazing. And I'm like, could be better.
yeah,
It's always like, there's always that improvement. And the best thing about, martial arts, and I guess it's not really specific, but of course it's like Muay Thai or MMA or Jiu-Jitsu. It's that it's always trying to perfect something that can never be perfected. And it's like, it's the continual chase.
yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, because even if you become like, a black belt, there's always another black belt somewhere who has like Trey makes a gym, and that gym has a specialty, and you've never seen it before, and they are just dominating you with something.
Oh gosh.
And Joe Rogan mentions that over and over. He's like, I'm a black belt, but I don't feel like it sometimes.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it never stops. It goes it's continual. There's no end.
I'm really hard to submit generally, especially when it comes to chokes. There was one day where it's funny that you bring that up. I went 12 rounds grappling with Trey one time.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was just like one of those things where we would have these little meetups, right? This was at the Lee Summit location back then, and we would have these little training sessions, but for that particular day, it was just Trey and I because no one else showed up or something, or everyone else was busy.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my God, it's just Trey and I. And he submitted me. He choked me, I think, twice every round for 12 rounds. And I am so hard to choke.
Yeah, you were
generally
like, this
speaking.
isn't gonna happen.
Yeah. And so, yeah, there's always someone better. There's always someone with an answer. And yeah, there's something very special about marathon MMA. And, I'm excited to go back. I'm going to come back soon.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know when, given like work and all the other priorities, but I have to go back because there could be something on the table very soon. So,
well, I'm excited to hear
yeah.
it. But no, is there anything else you wanted to add or say? I think I made the notes. We hit all of them.
We did,
and I never looked at the computer.
Yeah. Well, good. I mean,
so I was like, that's how we go.
I don't know if there's anything else to add. I mean, I think those are, like, we covered kind of the big topics.
Yeah, those were all the things I had to ask. But there is something that from this conversation, not an insult to anyone else who's been on the show, but there are these, like, I think me and you had this relatable thing of like, oh, that was me when I was there. And it's like, it's so good to say that and then someone know what I mean.
Oh, yeah.
So I appreciate that I could be the person that you told other than your wife about these things, and I can reciprocate back to you and make it enjoyable for you guys as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, Nathan, thank you so much, man. I had a great time.
Thank you so much, Chase.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.